Imagine this scene. The year is 1243, and you're standing on a windswept plateau in eastern Anatolia. The ground trembles beneath thousands of hooves. Two armies face each other across the valley near Kosa. On one side, Sultan Khosrow II commands perhaps the largest army the Sultanate of Rum has ever assembled. Estimates range from 60,000 to 80,000 warriors. Seljuk Turks, Georgian auxiliaries, Frankish mercenaries, even troops from the Empire of Trebizond and the Ayyubid Sultanate. It's an impressive coalition on paper. On the other side, Mongol general Baiju Noyan sits calmly on his horse with perhaps 30,000 warriors. They're outnumbered more than 2 to 1, yet there's no fear in their eyes. They've done this before. They've shattered armies twice this size from China to Persia. And by tomorrow evening, the Sultanate of Rum will cease to exist as an independent power. What nobody standing on that battlefield comprehends is that this military victory will accidentally create the conditions for the most powerful Turkish empire in history to emerge. The Mongols are about to win the battle and lose the war, but that war won't be fought for another 200 years. Before we explore this extraordinary historical paradox, if you appreciate uncovering the hidden patterns of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're watching from. I find it incredible that we're examining these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. To understand how destroying one empire accidentally built another, we need to rewind 172 years before Kosa. The year is 1071. At the Battle of Manzikert, the Seljuk Turks under Alp Arslan defeat the Byzantine Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes. This isn't just a military victory, it's a civilizational earthquake. The defeat opens Anatolia, the heartland of Byzantium, the breadbasket that fed Constantinople, to Turkish conquest and settlement. This wasn't a simple invasion where soldiers march in, plant flags and leave. This was migration on a massive scale. Thousands of Turkish families, entire clans from the Central Asian steppes, flooded into Anatolia. They brought their language, their culture, their Islamic faith, and their social structures. They didn't just conquer the land, they became the land. By 1077, they had established the Sultanate of Rum. The name itself is fascinating. Rum means Rome in Arabic and Turkish because this territory had belonged to the Eastern Roman Empire, what we call Byzantium. The Seljuk Turks were essentially saying, "We are the new Romans. This is our Rome now." And for the next 166 years, the Sultanate of Rum thrived. By the late 12th and early 13th centuries, it reached its zenith. This wasn't some barbaric frontier state. This was a sophisticated civilization. They constructed an extensive network of caravanserais, fortified rest stops along trade routes connecting Central Asia with the Mediterranean. Commerce flourished, particularly with Italian city-states like Genoa and Venice. Cities like Konya became centers of learning where scholars studied astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy. Here's what's remarkable. The Sultanate of Rum developed a unique hybrid culture. The sultans often had Persian names. Court officials spoke Persian. Literature and architecture bore deep Persian influence. Why? Because the Turkish peoples understood something crucial. To rule a civilized territory successfully, you don't just impose your culture through force. You absorb the sophistication of the lands you conquer. They combined Turkish military prowess with Persian administrative excellence and cultural refinement, creating something genuinely new. But empires don't last forever, especially when they're caught between two grinding millstones. From the west, Crusader states constantly pressured Rum's borders. From the east, something far more terrifying was rising. In 1206, a warlord named Temujin united the fractured Mongol tribes under his banner. He took a new name, Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. And over the next 2 decades, Mongol armies swept across Central Asia like an avalanche made of steel and fire. Between 1219 and 1221, they obliterated the Khwarezmian Empire, one of the most powerful Islamic states of the era. Cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, and Merv were razed to the ground with industrial efficiency. The death toll remains disputed. Estimates range from hundreds of thousands to possibly 2 million people. This wasn't just conquest, this was psychological warfare. The message was crystal clear. Resist the Mongols, and your civilization will be erased from the earth. By the early 1230s, Mongol forces had conquered most of Persia and were now at the Sultanate of Rum's eastern frontier. Initially, the Sultans of Rum tried armed diplomacy. In 1236, Sultan Kaikubad I pragmatically acknowledged himself as a vassal of the Mongol Empire, agreeing to pay tribute. This was intelligent realpolitik. Rum couldn't defeat the Mongols militarily, nobody could. But by submitting, they could maintain internal autonomy and continue governing their own affairs. For several years, this arrangement worked reasonably well. But in 1241, everything changed. Ogedei Khan, the great Khan ruling the Mongol Empire, died. The empire plunged into a succession crisis as different factions jockeyed for power. Sultan Khosrow II, observing this chaos from Konya, made a catastrophic miscalculation. He believed the Mongols were too preoccupied with internal politics to respond if he stopped paying tribute. He declared independence. This was one of history's great strategic blunders. Khosrow underestimated two critical realities. First, the Mongols, despite their succession dispute, maintained a ruthlessly efficient military command structure. Regional commanders like Baiju Noyan didn't need permission from the distant capital to crush rebellion. Second, for the Mongols, allowing any vassal to rebel without severe punishment would set a catastrophically dangerous precedent. If Rum escaped unpunished, every other vassal state from Korea to Persia would rebel simultaneously. The empire would collapse from within. Mongol General Baiju summoned Khosrow to reaffirm his submission. When the Sultan refused, Baiju declared war. Khosrow assembled what contemporary sources describe as a massive coalition army. Modern historians estimate somewhere between 60,000 to 80,000 troops. Though medieval numbers are notoriously unreliable, he forged alliances with the Empire of Trebizond, the Ayyubid Sultanate of Aleppo, and hired Frankish mercenaries. On paper, this coalition appeared formidable. Baiju commanded perhaps 30,000 Mongol cavalry, supplemented by some Georgian and Armenian auxiliaries. They met at Kusadar, near modern-day Erzincan, in the summer of 1243. For most of the first day, numerical advantage seemed to favour Rum. But the coalition lacked unified command and discipline. These weren't integrated units, they were separate contingents, with different languages and tactics. The Mongol army, though smaller, moved like a single organism. Toward the end of the day, the Mongols employed their signature tactic, the feigned retreat. They appeared to flee, then suddenly wheeled their cavalry around in perfect formation, unleashing continuous volleys of arrows. Panic rippled through the Rum ranks like wildfire. That night, something extraordinary happened. The entire coalition army abandoned their camp and fled. Sultan Khosrow himself escaped, fearing that disloyal subordinates might capture him and hand him to the Mongols to save themselves. Baiju, suspecting the abandoned camp might be a trap, waited an additional day before advancing cautiously. This delay allowed Khosrow to escape capture, but the victory was absolute. The Sultanate of Rum never recovered from this catastrophe. The Sultan's vizier, Shams al-Din, had to negotiate humiliating surrender terms. The annual tribute was crushing. Sources mention staggering amounts of silver coins, silk, livestock and goods, all transported to distant Mongolia at Rum's expense. A Mongol supervisor was appointed to oversee the region permanently. The Sultan of Rum technically still ruled, but only as a puppet dancing on Mongol strings. In 1246, Khosrow II died. His three sons immediately began fighting for succession, fragmenting the kingdom. The Mongols actively encouraged this division. A fractured sultanate was far easier to control than a unified state. From 1243 to 1308, the Sultanate of Rum existed in name only. Real authority rested in Mongol hands. In 1256, all of Anatolia formally submitted to Mungka Khan. After 1264, following Sultan Kilai Arslan IV's death, Rum was effectively governed by Mongol administrators. Central authority disintegrated day by day. Local lords, seeing the Sultanate's weakness, began acting independently. Small principalities called beyliks emerged throughout Anatolia, like mushrooms after rain. In 1308, the last sultan was killed, possibly assassinated. The Sultanate of Rum officially ceased to exist. Now here's what's crucial to understand. This wasn't just a political reorganization. This was complete structural collapse. Previously, Anatolia had strong central government. Now, nobody possessed the strength to unify the region. Dozens of small beyliks competed viciously with each other. There were no common laws, no stable security, no predictable trade conditions. For most people, this meant chaos and suffering. But in chaos, opportunity always emerges for those positioned to seize it. Around 1254 to 1258, the exact year remains uncertain, a child was born in northwestern Anatolia. His name was Osman. His father, Ertuğrul, led a small Turkish tribe from the Kai clan. They had been granted modest grazing lands by the Sultanate of Rum as reward for military service. As Osman grew to adulthood, he inherited control of a tiny beylik, smaller than half of modern Switzerland. But this beylik possessed one extraordinary geographical advantage. It was located in northwestern Anatolia, facing the Byzantine Empire. Far enough east to avoid direct Mongol interference, close enough west to access weakening Byzantine territories. Think about the situation from the perspective of a Turkish warrior, craftsman, or scholar in the 1280s and 1290s. The Mongols had devastated Central Asia and Persia. Those regions were under brutal occupation. You couldn't go east, that meant Mongol rule. You couldn't stay in central Anatolia. That was chaos, with beyliks constantly warring against each other, offering no stability or opportunity. But to the west there was a small beylik on the Byzantine frontier. For Ghazi warriors, those who considered fighting to expand Islamic territories a sacred duty, this was perfect. This beylik offered what nowhere else could: the opportunity to fight against the infidel Byzantines, the chance to expand territory and gain wealth. Most importantly, escape from Mongol domination. Osman's beylik became a magnet, not because it was the strongest or richest, but because it occupied the right geographical position at the right historical moment. Thousands migrated there. Each wave brought valuable skills. Warriors brought combat experience from campaigns across Asia. Craftsmen brought techniques for metalworking, textiles, and construction. Scholars brought administrative knowledge from serving previous empires. Religious scholars brought spiritual legitimacy. Osman wasn't a military genius like Alexander, but he possessed three critical qualities. First, patience. He expanded methodically, capturing small Byzantine fortresses, one at a time. Second, organizational ability. He transformed nomadic warriors into disciplined military and administrative structures. Third, the ability to attract talented people. He treated both Muslims and Christians with relative fairness, and many Byzantine officials surrendered to him rather than face destruction. In 1299, Osman executed a symbolically crucial act. He declared independence from the Sultanate of Rum, which by then existed only as a hollow shell. He ordered that Friday sermons in mosques be conducted in his name, not in the name of the Sultan of Rum or the Mongol overlords. In Islamic political culture, this was a declaration of sovereignty. We are an independent state. This year, 1299, is traditionally considered the founding date of the Ottoman Empire, though at the time It was just a small beylik you could traverse on horseback in a few days. But the seed had been planted in fertile soil. Over the next 25 years, Osman systematically doubled his territory. In 1326, shortly before his death, his son Orhan captured Bursa, an important city only about 100 kilometers from Constantinople. Bursa became the first Ottoman capital, a real urban center replacing the nomadic encampments of earlier years. From this foundation, over the next 127 years, the Ottomans expanded relentlessly. In 1453, Sultan Mehmed II conquered Constantinople itself, ending the 1,000-year Byzantine Empire and establishing the Ottomans as one of the world's most formidable powers. They would control 3 continents and last over 600 years. So how did the Mongols accidentally create the very rival they wanted to prevent? The answer lies in 4 critical factors. First, the Mongols were extraordinarily effective at destroying power structures but didn't construct an effective replacement. Anatolia was never their primary focus. It was a peripheral province. They were satisfied collecting tribute and maintaining chaos, but power vacuums don't remain empty. Dozens of small beyliks emerged, and one positioned in exactly the right location would become the Ottomans. Second, when the Mongols devastated Central Asia and Persia, hundreds of thousands fled westward. Experienced warriors, skilled craftsmen, educated administrators, religious scholars. They brought institutional knowledge of how to organize states and armies. Osman and his successors absorbed this knowledge. The Ottomans learned from previous empires, even studying Mongol techniques. Third, if Byzantium had remained strong, the Ottomans would have had no chance whatsoever. But Byzantium had been catastrophically weakened by the Fourth Crusade in 1204, when Crusaders sacked Constantinople and shattered the empire. Add to that continuous civil wars, economic crisis, territorial losses to Serbs, Bulgarians, and other Turkish beyliks, and Byzantium no longer possessed capacity to counter the Ottoman threat effectively. Fourth, the Ottomans constructed their identity around the concept of Ghazi warriors, fighters for Islam. This wasn't merely propaganda. This was genuine ideological motivation that attracted warriors from throughout the Islamic world. While other Anatolian beyliks fought each other over scraps of territory, the Ottomans focused on expanding westward into Byzantine lands. This created a unifying mission that gave everyone a common purpose. This represents a perfect example of systems thinking in history. The Mongols optimized for a short-term objective: destroy the Sultanate of Rum and eliminate a potential threat. They succeeded completely in this goal, but they failed to account for second-order consequences. By creating a power vacuum, by pushing hundreds of thousands of skilled people westward, by not building a stable administrative replacement, they inadvertently engineered the perfect conditions for a new power to emerge. And that power, the Ottomans, ultimately became far stronger than the Sultanate of Rum the Mongols had destroyed. After nearly 780 years, what does this story teach us? In complex systems, and history is an extraordinarily complex system, no action exists in isolation. Every decision produces consequences, and many consequences are genuinely unpredictable. The Mongols were one of the most intelligent, organized empires in human history. They possessed excellent strategic planning and sophisticated intelligence networks. Yet even they couldn't foresee that destroying Rum would create conditions for the Ottomans. This doesn't mean we should never act decisively, but it demands humility about our predictive abilities and constant preparation for unintended outcomes. When you destroy a power structure, you never create emptiness. You create opportunity for new forces to fill the vacuum. The crucial question isn't should we destroy or not, but if we destroy, who will fill the void, and will they be better or worse than what we eliminated? The Mongols destroyed Rum but didn't build a strong replacement structure. The result was dozens of small beyliks emerging, and one of them eventually became the Ottomans. Osman wasn't the most talented leader in Anatolia. His beylik wasn't the richest or strongest, but he was in the right place, at the right time, with the right approach. This doesn't diminish his achievements. Success requires both capability and favourable conditions. But it reminds us that context matters enormously. History overflows with paradoxes like this. Well-intentioned actions sometimes produce disasters. Disasters sometimes create unexpected opportunities. The strongest empires occasionally emerge from the most humble circumstances. The Battle of Kösehdağ in 1243 was a decisive Mongol victory, but 210 years later, the descendants of those they defeated conquered Constantinople, establishing an empire lasting another 469 years. This demands humility from all of us. We can never know with certainty the long-term consequences of our actions. What appears as victory may plant seeds of future defeat. What seems like catastrophe may generate conditions for later success. If this exploration of history's greatest paradoxes helped you see the world from a new perspective, please like and subscribe to support the channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss other stories about the hidden patterns that shape our world. And I genuinely want to hear from you. Have you ever seen an action in your own life lead to completely opposite results from what was intended? Share your story in the comments below.